host of the Afghanistan Project Podcast and also a freelance reporter for Fox News Digital. Beth, thank you very much for joining us bright and early today. Now, your podcast focuses on conditions that led to the Afghan government's collapse in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal. For Afghans who did work with the U.S. military or its allies and who were unable to flee the country since that U.S. withdrawal, what has life looked like for them in Afghanistan? Have they been targeted by the Taliban government?
Absolutely, they have. And Aaron, I just want to thank you for having me. This is such an important conversation right now. There are still Lighthouse Reports just issued a report talking about reprisals that are ongoing against particularly Special Forces personnel who worked alongside the U.S. During our time in the country, and a lot of Afghans who were formerly part of the Afghan government are unable to work, having a lot of struggles getting food. Many Afghans have made their way to Pakistan if they were afraid of being targeted by the Taliban, and now Pakistan has begun deporting them back to the country. And I've heard of numerous cases of arrests and just people living in fear for their lives once more. It's very distressing.
So clearly a segment of the population that faces persecution then in Afghanistan. Now, meanwhile, do you have an idea of how much of the Afghan refugee population or Afghan asylum seeker population in the U.S. did indeed work with the U.S. military? And as a follow-up to that, how will they be impacted then by this latest move from the White House?
So there were 72,000 Afghans who were brought here during Operation Allies Welcome. Those were the individuals who came in on planes that we all saw departing from Kabul in August of 2021. And it's hard to say what proportion of them worked directly with the U.S. military. I can tell you that there were many who did, in fact, work with the U.S. military or who worked with the U.S. in other capacities that put them at direct risk. There are a total of 190,000 Afghans who've come here through both Operation Allies Welcome and Enduring Welcome. And the proportion that were not part of the 72,000 from Operation Allies Welcome are vetted individuals who came in through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program and the SIV program, and whom we know absolutely worked with us in some capacity and were at risk because of that service. And they will, not the Enduring Welcome folks. Those folks should be rather safe. Actually, that's not true. The refugees now, there's a leaked memo from USCIS last week that stated that the Trump administration intended to re-vet all of the refugees who came into the U.S. between January of 2021 and February of 2025. So any Afghans who came in through that population are now subject to re-vetting. And this was leaked 2 days prior to that horrifying attack. And so it was already an intention of the administration. The people who I think will be most impacted are the 125,000 Afghans who are still attempting to get an SIV, a special immigrant visa, or the 85,000 individuals who are in the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program and are overseas waiting for help because there are no more SIVs being issued. And the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program has been suspended since February and includes no additional Afghan placements for the next fiscal year at least.
Now, Beth, there's been quite a bit of focus on the background of the killer in last week's shooting, notably because he indeed worked with a notorious CIA-backed unit in Afghanistan. You said, of course, that Afghans worked in many different capacities with the U.S. military, but this one is quite particular. Can you tell us more about these units and some of the difficulties that Afghans who worked with them face specifically being in Afghanistan or upon their arrival in the U.S. for those who were able to request asylum in the U.S.?
Absolutely. So this was part of the Zero Units. The National Strike Unit is their formal name. And the National Strike Unit was actually called to Kabul in those final days to help the U.S. fortify Hamid Karzai International Airport. And I think that without their assistance, we would have faced a lot more difficulties during the chaos of the withdrawal. The NSU worked alongside the U.S. our top special forces personnel alongside the CIA. They conducted targeted strikes to take out high value targets. And they were invaluable. As my good friend says, they kept many stars off of the CIA memorial wall by preserving the lives of Americans. And so when they came here, some of them were facing physical difficulties, prostheses that they had that they needed to get assistance for. I There's been a lot of difficulty getting special immigrant visas for this population because they were deemed safe because they were here in the US, and we wanted to prioritize people who didn't make it here and get them SIV under the Biden administration. And so there's been a lot of uncertainty, a lot of feeling like they are not part of this country. And in this particular situation, the individual who committed this heinous atrocity, he had applied for an SIV in August of 2022, according to Afghan evac, and he only received chief of mission approval in April of 2025. It's only supposed to take 9 months to adjudicate an SIV because of the danger present to individuals who are applying for it. And so that's a lot of uncertainty to go through. And of course, it doesn't excuse anything that happened, the horrors that happened this week. But there's just a lot of strain and stress on this particular population and on a lot of people who came here and are still waiting on any kind of certainty, because the humanitarian parole that they received only lasted 2 years, was renewed, and it's already, there is no more humanitarian parole for Afghans who arrived here. It has not been renewed, and they're in a very difficult status right now.
Beth Bailey, host of the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm so sorry, that's unfortunately all we have time for, although there's so much more to say on this topic. Thank you so very much again for getting up early to join us here on France 24.